The billionaire stood frozen in the doorway of his own dining room, his hands still gripping the brass door handle, his blood running cold. There, at his $30,000 mahogany table, the one he had imported from an estate in Yorkshire, the one where he had signed deals that moved markets, sat two small boys. Identical, no more than 6 years old. Their dark hair was neatly combed. Their postures were perfectly straight, and they were eating lunch. Off his china, in his chairs. His maid, the quiet woman who had worked for him for nearly 3 years, was standing between them, gently wiping the corner of one boy's mouth with a cloth napkin, correcting the other's grip on his fork, murmuring soft instructions about keeping elbows off the table. She moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Not like an employee, like a mother. Marcus Ashford had built a global empire by trusting his instincts. He had survived hostile takeovers, corporate espionage, and the death of his wife. Nothing surprised him anymore. But in this moment, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: complete and utter confusion. Who were these children? Why were they in his home? And why did his maid, this woman who had never once stepped out of line, look at him now with an expression that was neither fear nor apology, but something closer to relief? But to understand what happened next, to truly grasp why this single moment would shatter everything Marcus Ashford believed about power, about family, and about himself, we have to go back to the beginning. The answer to that question is more shocking than you can imagine. If you believe that a single moment can reveal a person's true character, hit that subscribe button and join us, because you are about to witness one of those moments. Marcus Ashford had earned every penny of his $4 billion fortune the hard way. Born to a machinist father and a schoolteacher mother in a 2-bedroom house outside of Cleveland, he had clawed his way up through night classes, unpaid internships, and a relentless drive that bordered on obsession. By 35, he owned his first factory. By 45, he owned 12. By 60, his name was synonymous with American manufacturing itself. But success, as Marcus had learned, extracts its payment in full. His wife, Catherine, had died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. She had been the only person who could make him laugh, the only one who dared to tell him when he was being unreasonable, the only warmth in a life otherwise defined by cold efficiency. When she passed, something inside him sealed shut, like a vault door closing for the final time. He never remarried. He never dated. He simply continued. Building, acquiring, controlling. His mansion reflected the man he had become. It was a sprawling estate on 17 acres, with 12 bedrooms that were never slept in, a library with first editions that were never read, and a formal dining room that seated 24 and fed 1. The air inside always carried the faint scent of lemon oil and expensive wax, the smell of preservation, of things maintained but never touched. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors like a clock counting down the hours of a life spent alone. The staff moved through this world like ghosts, trained to be efficient and invisible. The groundskeeper, the chef, the driver, and Elena. Elena Vasquez had been hired 3 years prior through a reputable agency. Her references were immaculate. Her work was flawless. She arrived each morning at 6, prepared the house, anticipated his needs before he voiced them, and disappeared into the background so completely that Marcus sometimes forgot she existed at all. She was perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that showed the evidence of a lifetime of work. She never spoke unless spoken to. She never asked for anything. If Marcus had bothered to look, really look, he might have noticed the weight she carried. The way her eyes sometimes lingered on a photograph of him from decades ago, displayed on a shelf in the study. The way she paused, just for a heartbeat, whenever he mentioned the word family. But Marcus Ashford was not a man who looked at the people around him. He looked through them, past them, toward the next acquisition, the next problem to solve, the next wall to build. He had no idea that the most important truth of his life was living right under his roof. That Tuesday began like any other. Marcus rose at 5:30, reviewed overnight reports from his Asian operations, ate a breakfast of egg whites and dry toast prepared by his chef, and was in his car by 7. His driver, a former Marine named Thomas who knew better than to make conversation, navigated the morning traffic while Marcus conducted calls with his legal team. The meeting was scheduled to run until 2. A quarterly review with his board of directors, held in the glass tower downtown that bore his name. But the meeting ended early. A vote that was supposed to be contentious passed unanimously. The lawyers had nothing left to argue. Marcus found himself with something he almost never had: unexpected time. Rather than wait in the sterile silence of his office, he made a decision he rarely made. He told Thomas to take him home. He did not call ahead. He did not announce his arrival. He simply walked through the front door of his own home at 12:43 in the afternoon, expecting the same silence that always greeted him. Instead, he heard laughter. It was coming from the dining room, that cold, ceremonial space that hadn't known joy since Catherine's last birthday dinner 7 years ago. Marcus's polished Oxford stopped on the marble floor. His brow furrowed. The sound was so foreign to this house that for a moment, he wondered if he had entered the wrong property. He moved toward the dining room. The laughter faded into soft murmurs, the clink of silverware against porcelain, the gentle rhythm of a meal being shared. And then he pushed open the door. The scene before him made no sense. 2 boys, identical, dark-haired and neat as pins. They were seated in chairs that had been pulled closer together, small cushions added to boost them to table height. Between them sat plates of chicken and vegetables, real food, not the austere meals his chef prepared for him, cut into careful, child-sized pieces. And there was Elena, his maid, standing between the boys like she belonged there, dabbing a napkin at one child's chin, her voice warm and maternal as she reminded the other to sit up straight. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Elena looked up. Her eyes met his. And in that instant, Marcus saw something he had never seen in 3 years of her service. She was not surprised. She was not afraid. She was waiting. "Mr. Ashford," she said calmly, "you're home early." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. His voice, when it came, was quiet and cold. The voice that had made grown men squirm in boardrooms. The voice that preceded terminations and broken careers. "Who are these children? And why are they eating at my table?" The boys looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. They did not flinch. They did not cower. They simply watched him, their small faces reflecting an unsettling familiarity. And that's when Marcus noticed something that made his blood turn to ice. One of the boys was holding his fork in an unusual way. Not the way children typically grip silverware, but with his index finger extended along the handle. The same distinctive hold Marcus had used since childhood, a habit his own father had tried and failed to correct. He looked at the other boy. There, at the crown of his head, was a cowlick, a stubborn swirl of dark hair that refused to lie flat, positioned in exactly the same place as Marcus's own. A flicker of recognition sparked in his chest. Something primal, something terrifying. He looked at Elena, and for the first time, he truly saw her. "Who are they?" he asked again, but his voice had changed. The ice had cracked. Elena set down the napkin. She straightened her posture. And when she spoke, her voice carried no apology, no pleading, no fear. It carried the quiet authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "I think you already know, Mr. Ashford, but if you need me to say it, I will." She stepped back from the table, giving him a clear view of the twins. "Their names are Daniel and Michael. They are 6 years old, and they are your sons." The words landed like a hammer blow. Marcus gripped the doorframe. "That's impossible." "No," Elena said softly. "It's simply the truth." She told him then, in measured words, the story she had carried alone for years. Her younger sister, Maria, had been a conference coordinator at a hotel in Philadelphia. 7 years ago, during a week-long industry summit, she had met Marcus Ashford. He had been charming, magnetic, recently widowed, and achingly lonely in a way he tried to hide beneath power. They had spent 3 nights together. When the conference ended, so did whatever existed between them. No numbers exchanged. No promises made. 8 months later, Maria gave birth to twin boys. She had tried, once, to reach out. She had called his company. She had been transferred 4 times, put on hold for an hour, and eventually told that Mr. Ashford did not accept personal calls. The message was clear: she was nothing to him. So she raised the boys alone. She worked double shifts. She sacrificed everything. And she never told them about their father's wealth. Only that he was a good man who didn't know they existed. Maria's health began to fail when the boys were 4. A heart condition, genetic, overlooked until it was too late. She was gone within 6 months. Before she died, Elena said, her voice steady, "She made me promise to do whatever it took to give her sons a future. She didn't want your money, Mr. Ashford. She wanted you to know them. So I applied for a position here. It took me 9 months to get through your agency's screening process. But I did." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over him. "These boys have lived in your guest house for 2 years. I've fed them with my own wages. I've educated them with materials I bought myself. And every single day, I've prepared them to meet you. If you ever proved yourself worthy of meeting them." Marcus stared at her, his face drained of color. 2 years. 2 years, she confirmed. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for a sign that you were more than what you appear to be. More than the cold man who walks through this house like it's a museum and treats the people in it like furniture. She gestured toward the twins, who were watching this exchange with the quiet attentiveness of children who understood more than adults gave them credit for. "They already know your name," Elena said. "I just didn't know if you were ready to know theirs." The silence that followed was absolute. And there it was. The horrifying truth. The billionaire's entire world was completely turned upside down in a matter of seconds. But the story doesn't end here. The most important part, the part that shows what a man is truly made of, is what he does next. Before we continue, comment below with what you would do in this man's shoes. We read every single one. For the first time in 40 years, Marcus Ashford was speechless. He had negotiated with presidents. He had testified before Congress. He had stared down men who threatened his life and never blinked. But standing in his own dining room, looking at 2 small boys who carried his blood, his mannerisms, and his features, he felt something he had spent a lifetime building walls against. He felt vulnerable. Memories flooded back, unwanted, uncontrollable. Philadelphia. The conference. A woman with kind eyes and a laugh that had made him forget, just for a few days, the grief that was consuming him. He had left that hotel believing he was escaping back to his real life. He had never considered that his real life might have been left behind in that room. The boys were watching him now, not with fear, not with expectation, just curiosity. The innocent, unguarded curiosity of children who hadn't yet learned that adults often disappoint. One of them, Michael, he thought, tilted his head and said, "Are you the man in the pictures?" Marcus's throat closed. Elena had hung photographs of him in their room. She had shown them who their father was, had told them stories, had kept him alive in their hearts even as he walked past them every single day without knowing they existed. She had done the work, the real work, the work of a mother. He thought about the mansion around him, the silent rooms, the empty chairs, the decades spent accumulating things instead of people, building walls instead of relationships. He thought about Catherine, who had wanted children so badly, who had wept when the doctors told them it might never happen. She would have loved these boys. She would have given everything for them. And he had missed it. All of it. "I've spent 40 years building walls," he said finally, his voice rough. "And I never noticed who was living on the other side of them." Elena's expression softened, just slightly, just for a moment. "It's not too late, Mr. Ashford, isn't it?" She shook her head. "They're 6 years old. They have their whole lives ahead of them. The question isn't whether it's too late. The question is what you're going to do now." Marcus looked at the boys. At Daniel, with his careful posture and serious eyes. At Michael, with his cowlick and his crooked smile. They were eating again, unfazed by the adult conversation happening above their heads, trusting Elena to handle whatever came next. And in that moment, something shifted inside Marcus Ashford. The vault door cracked open. He did not return to the office that afternoon. Instead, he pulled a chair to the table, a real chair, not the throne-like seat at the head where he usually held court, and sat down at his son's level. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. I'm your father." Daniel looked at him with those serious eyes. "Elena said you might not want us." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. She was wrong. She said sometimes grown-ups are scared of things they don't understand. Marcus glanced at Elena, who stood with her hands folded, watching. He turned back to his son. Elena was right about that part, he admitted. I've been scared for a long time. Scared of being alone. Scared of caring about something I might lose. But I don't want to be scared anymore. Michael reached across the table and, with the simple fearlessness of a child, placed his small hand over Marcus's weathered one. It's okay, he said. We'll help you. Marcus Ashford, who had never cried in a boardroom, who had delivered his wife's eulogy with dry eyes and a steady voice, felt tears spill down his face for the first time in years. In the weeks that followed, the mansion began to change. At first, it was subtle. Toys appeared in the library. Crayon drawings were taped to the refrigerator in the kitchen. The formal dining room table, once polished and untouched, became scratched with the evidence of juice boxes and coloring books. Then it became undeniable. Marcus canceled meetings to attend the boys' first day at a proper school. He converted the cold and used guest wing into 2 bright bedrooms filled with books and stuffed animals and everything 2 6-year-old boys could dream of. He fired his pretentious chef and hired a woman from the neighborhood who knew how to make mac and cheese and didn't flinch when sticky fingers touched her clean counters. He called his lawyers. The will was rewritten. The board was informed. Daniel and Michael Ashford were publicly acknowledged as his heirs, not as a strategic move, not as damage control, but because Marcus wanted the world to know. These were his sons. He was their father, and that was that. But perhaps the most significant change involved Elena. She had offered to leave. Now that her mission was complete, now that the boys were safe and acknowledged, she assumed her role had ended. She began to pack her things. Marcus stopped her at the door. Where do you think you're going? My work here is done, Mr. Ashford. He shook his head. Your work as a maid is done. But those boys have loved you for their entire lives. You're the only mother they've ever known. And I'm not going to take that from them, or from you. Elena's composure, which had held steady through every trial, finally cracked. Her eyes glistened. What are you saying? Marcus took a breath. I'm saying you're not staff anymore. You're family. I'm saying there's a suite on the main floor with your name on it. And I'm saying that those boys need you. Hell, I need you. You're the only person in this house who's ever told me the truth without flinching. He paused. Stay? Please. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharply, in that practical way of hers. Fine, she said. But I'm not doing your laundry anymore. For the first time in years, Marcus laughed. The mansion that had once smelled of lemon oil and expensive wax now smelled of cinnamon toast and hot cocoa. The footsteps that had once echoed lonely on marble floors were now accompanied by the thundering of small feet and the joyful shouts of boys who had finally, truly, found their home. The formal dining room table, that $30,000 antique from Yorkshire, now bore the honorable scars of family meals, a water ring from a carelessly placed glass, a crayon mark that wouldn't quite come out, a scratch from a toy car that had gone rogue during dessert. Marcus didn't repair any of it. He didn't want to. Those marks were evidence. Proof that his house had finally become something it had never been before, a home. And on quiet evenings, when the boys were asleep and the house had settled into peaceful stillness, Marcus would sit in his study and look at the old photographs, not of business deals or political handshakes, but of Catherine. He would tell her, silently, about the grandsons she never got to meet, about the strange, unexpected grace that had entered his life through a maid he had overlooked and 2 children he had never known existed. He liked to think she would have approved. No, he knew she would have. The lesson of Marcus Ashford's story is not about wealth or power or the empires we build with our hands. It's about what happens when quiet truth walks into the room and asks us to become someone better. For 60 years, Marcus had defined himself by what he controlled. His companies, his investments, his carefully constructed walls. But he had never controlled the thing that mattered most, whether he would open his heart when life gave him an unexpected second chance. Elena could have revealed the boys in anger. She could have demanded money, threatened lawyers, sold the story to tabloids. Instead, she chose dignity. She waited. She watched. And she gave Marcus the opportunity to rise to the occasion. The real power in that dining room didn't belong to the billionaire. It belonged to a woman who had nothing left to lose and two boys who deserved everything. And in the end, Marcus didn't just gain heirs. He gained a family. He gained purpose. He gained the one thing his billions could never buy, a second chance to become the man he should have been all along. True character isn't revealed by how we protect our power. It's revealed by how we respond when quiet truth asks us to share it. This story reminds us that family isn't always the one we're born into. Sometimes it's the one that's been waiting for us to open our eyes. If this story resonated with you, and you want more tales that inspire and make you think, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. Our next story is about a waitress who receives a lottery ticket as a tip, and the decision she makes will change 3 lives forever. You won't want to miss it.